When you hear people say things like there's no glory in war and war is hell, usually they're referring to the wanton violence, the lives that are broken, and the just extreme human cost that comes to warfare, which is all certainly true. But another thing they don't really talk about at the veterans groups or show in Hollywood too much is just how gross war can be sometimes. Even in the modern era, you can't get away from poop. And it's pretty gross. Any veteran can tell you, they probably have some weird poop stories. And the simple reality is that when you take a large number of troops and push them into more austere environments, which is where, war tends to be waged away from infrastructure, you have these weird logistical problems of how do you deal with human waste. Even in like small patrol bases where you got 30, 40 guys out in the woods, you have to manage, do you dig a slit or straddle trench? Do you just dig holes, bury the poop? A lot of time that's done in small groups. Because you can't leave the poop just sitting on the surface for someone to step in. One, that's gross and nasty. The other thing is that it's a good way to spread disease. Other times, if you're in more fixed areas, like a good buddy of mine was spent some time in Ukraine, they had a dedicated abandoned bunker kind of behind the lines, and everyone would go into that room. They would poop in a plastic shopping bag and then just throw it in a pile. That is a somewhat common solution, especially in urban environments. You may just have a dedicated poop room, and that is the gross room. And even go back in like World War I trenches, you would have the trenches dug over here, and you might just have a corner. This is the latrine over here. Everyone go do your business over there, and hope that you built it right enough so that when you get a heavy downpour, it doesn't backwash into your primary living area. Pretty nasty stuff. And then when you build into bigger, more infrastructure, larger areas, you have things like burn pits. Early global war on terror, you had a lot of troops staging around like airports and FOBs and stuff like that, where you just had way more people than any infrastructure could handle. So everyone would poop in these big metal buckets, and then you would assign some poor soul to go through and mix diesel in with the feces, stir it up, and burn it down to ash. Nasty, gnarly stuff. And a lot of people got really, really sick from doing that stuff. And then, of course, you also have what's called wag bags, hygiene bags, whatever you want to call them. Sometimes you see this with through hikers in the Appalachian Trail. Also pretty common in warfare because you can just poop in a bag and then you just carry it with you until you find some place where you can dump it. Nasty stuff. Handy for a lot of dismounted troops. There's a lot of training facilities like NTC that require this or have required it in the past. But these really come in handy with armored vehicle crews because sometimes you're doing, hours fighting in a tank or a Bradley or some armored vehicle. You can't necessarily get out all the time, and you may just need a bag to poop in, and then you just carry it with you until you can get rid of it. And as gross as all of this stuff is, this is the good stuff. This is the stuff that you do to mitigate the really nasty stuff. This is just maintaining hygiene and keeping the work that has to be done to keep people healthy. When you actually get into true warfare, like a lot of this is experienced in training environments, when you get into real warfare and people are actually dying and getting shot and you run into serious logistical problems, then hygiene tends to fail. The reality of rotting corpses, contaminated water, eating weird or bad food, all of these things result in sickness, diarrhea, dysentery, food poisoning, which just results in a lot of feces, and it is really gross. Go read the book House to House. He talks at length about how in the Second Battle of Fallujah there are just so many bodies, so much waste material just in the streets. Everyone in the platoon was sick with something, strep throat, diarrhea, whatever. They had pimples breaking out all over the place. That people were having such bad diarrhea that it was just, it runs down your leg and you're still patrolling and you're just dealing with the nastiness of it. Just really, really, really gross stuff. And it's important to note that actually, even when we talk about hygiene failing today, it's still a bit better than it was Historically, a lot of the stuff would kill you. You would get dysentery and just die. Nowadays, that's pretty uncommon thanks to modern hydration techniques. You usually have a medic with IV bags so that if you get really, really sick, you can get treated and you're not going to die from it. But historically, things would get worse. And actually, funny story, in the battle, in 1415, there was something called the Battle of Agincourt, a very famous, decisive victory that kind of illustrates the point of what we're talking about, where the British, with their longbowmen, managed to win a decisive, amazing battle against the French knights and just were able to hammer them and obliterate them as they crossed a big open muddy field. It's a huge famous battle in history, really kind of seen as a great glorious day for the British throne. Lots of beautiful paintings and stained glass and ballads written about this battle in particular. And something they don't talk about because it's not glorious, go figure, is that the British Army, the longbowmen, was pretty well affected by dysentery at the time. So much so that these longbowmen, when they were setting up, they actually mostly chose to go without pants because they were all having such violent diarrhea. So they were still able to fight. They were still able to knock their bows and fire their arrows and win the day, but they did it just covered in their own poop. Really gross stuff. But that's the sort of stuff when people say, there's no glory in war. That's what we're talking about. It's not all Hollywood, oh, you're dirty because you got dirt and dust on your face. No, there's a lot of poop in war.